Okay. Hello and welcome to today's session. I think it's been a while, but it's always wonderful to have an opportunity to interact with everyone once again. My name is Stanley. I'm with AFLIA, as you all know. Today, we're going to be having some interesting conversations around the rich African heritage, all of the wonderful local histories and knowledges that we have from the various tribes and indigenous people within Africa, and how, more importantly, how we can make this information available, how we can open it up so that many more people can have access to them without restrictions. And so these conversations are going to be led by three wonderful persons. Dr. Nkem from AFLIA, the Human Capacity Development and Training Director. We're also going to have Liz Levey, a consultant and enthusiast for openness. And then we're going to be hearing from Dr. Florence Amaka-Nwofo, who is a senior lecturer at Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Nigeria. Everybody is set and all is set. Before I usher in the first speaker, let me just make a few announcements. This session is being recorded, and as soon as we're done, we're going to work on uploading it onto the AFLIA YouTube channel. And then we're going to be sending every attendee here a notification once it's uploaded to the channel so that you can get the chance to re-engage the content. And then for those who probably could not attend the live session, they can have access to the recording. Again, we're also going to be sharing the resources. A few of our panelists will be speaking from presentation slides, and so we're going to be making them available. We'll send them to you as long as you register for this session and for tomorrow's session. We have your details and we can share them with you when we're done with the 2 days. I would just like to say that as the sessions are ongoing, feel free to ask questions. This is supposed to be more like a general open discussion and conversation. We know that there are many more information that you, from your perspective, depending on the tribe you belong to, wherever you are, you have some knowledge about your local history, some knowledge about the African heritage from where you belong. And so we want, besides the discussants leading all the various topics that we're going to be talking about, we want you to have a bite at it, share your information, feel free. And then let's look at how we can move this conversation about expanding and exposing African knowledge to the global world and then making it more accessible for everybody. So yeah, I would first of all like to invite Dr. Nkem, a household name. I'm sure you already know. I'll leave the rest of the sweet things for her to say by herself. But she's the one going to be starting the conversation right away. She's going to be talking about how African traditional knowledge and the local history can be opened up. And for those who are already in the WhatsApp groupings, I'm sure you've already looked at the very colorful presentation that she shared. So let's hear what all of this content is about and let's engage. Thank you. Dr. Nkem, I think you can start now.
Thank you very much, Stanley. Thank you. Please help me to share the slides. I'm going to talk about collecting Africa's local knowledge and history. Help me to share the slides, please, Stanley. And like Stanley said, this is a conversation. It's not a teaching. It's not a lecture. It's not. It's not really a webinar. It's a conversation, a discussion amongst the colleagues, so that we can see how to move this thing forward. This idea that we have about African local knowledge and history, how to ensure that it is open and available and accessible to all. Second slide, please. Now, according to WIPO is World Intellectual Property Organization. Local or international or traditional knowledge is defined as a living body of knowledge passed on from generation to another generation within a community. It's living, showing that it keeps on expanding, it keeps on growing. And this knowledge includes the know-how, the skills, practices developed within the community. And surprisingly, though, I also saw how they wrote about it, that all this knowledge is developed through intellectual exercises in a traditional context. It's not just something that somebody dreamt up or just maybe ideas, but through contributions from other people, from experiences within the community. So that's how this local or traditional knowledge is formed, and it is also a part of our cultural identity. That's the traditional knowledge of any community is part of its cultural identity. Next slide, please. And this knowledge, it consists of religious and mystical knowledge. Next slide, please, Stanley. Yeah, it consists of knowledge that came up through our belief systems, what we worship, what we revere, not just worship, the things that we hold sacrosanct. And also, the knowledge also integrates regulations that guide human interactions and engagement. That social aspect, how you greet your parents, how you greet elders, when somebody wants to get married, what processes do you go through, or if somebody dies, or if somebody, a group of young people, they come of age and they want to add them to an age grade and stuff like that. So that is also a part of our local knowledge. Then also, there's this group, should I call it group or category of knowledge that signify our relationship with, that's the African, the African relationship with the cosmology, universe, how they see the moon, the sun, the skies, how they see the climate, how they understand them when it rains and the type of rains that can fall at particular times of the year. Like in my place, we have the kind of rains that we say that is towards the end of the rainy season that such rains come, heavy thunderstorms and so on. So it is also part of our traditional knowledge, because it has grown over time, from year to year, generations to generations, how we interact with the universe. There's a picture I'm not seeing down there. Then there's another category, knowledge that guides. No. It's not that. There's a part of the slide that shows the agricultural aspect. The agricultural aspect. Okay, maybe others can see it, but I can't see it here. It's not that one. Still, no, still up there. Still that third slide. This is the knowledge that guides our relationships between man and land, as well as with animals for agricultural and medicinal purposes. Yes, that's it now. Yeah. So all these categories, all these make up our local or traditional knowledge. Now, the next slide, it talks about the forms, because they come in different formats. Here in this slide, I try to get people sitting under a hut, under an African moon and telling stories. I couldn't get the right image, but I tweaked that a little to look a little African. And then the other one down there is when, because it's not only kids that get told stories. Here also, I'm talking about as people grow older, they still learn from their parents. They still learn, from stories. Stories are told of this or that, and that is what this slide is all about. So, a format in which quite a lot of African knowledge appears in is stories told orally without books or anything like that, and passed on from one generation to the other. Then another format is the one we see, in music, songs, and dances. This is really complex because songs are also embedded inside stories. So it's like all of them are like one format, but really some songs can stand alone. And I read somewhere from someone, and it is really true, that sometimes when kids, they listen to these oral stories, traditional stories, folk tales, and so on, that sometimes at the end of the whole story, all they'll remember will be the songs. And those songs, they are meaningful. They also carry information. Then the next slide, please. Okay, no, please. This slide yet. Now, when I just want to, I've not finished here. Now, another category or another format of storing or of where our traditional knowledge is stored is through arts and crafts. In that picture there, you see a woman is weaving a mat, and it is rare when you go to our villages to find that art written in a book, and then you can read about it. No. It is passed on from generation to another. Most of the time it is by true observation, then stay with them. I wanted to find an open picture for African masks, for masquerades. I didn't see one, and I asked AI to create one for me, and this was what it created. It gave me 4 options though, but I took this one, and I'm using it here to represent the expressions of knowledge that are found, or that we derive from our belief systems. They can be wide and varied and diverse, as you may imagine, because different people, they have different ways of expressing what they believe in. Like some people will tell you that if you have not gone through a certain coming of age ritual or ceremony, you may not join this group to do this or that or that. So is the knowledge from this aspect is also is in its own format. So these are the forms of African local knowledge could think about today. Next slide. Then we are also talking about our local history. In the next slide, I said that today is history, tomorrow. The things that we see today, you may see a muddy road today, with no asphalt, and in the next 2 years is now a major road, is now an expressway. That is actually history. History is not just the story of ourselves that are told by others. History is also that thing that happens around us all the time, that are happening around us all the time today, but tomorrow it will be history to another generation. So that is why I put it here, because we are also trying to see how can African librarians collect local history, because it's really important that we know what is happening today. Even if you don't go into what happened yesterday, what is happening now, today in your own user community is really history tomorrow to every other person. Next slide, please. And now I asked us, remember the 5 laws of library science? It says books are for use, every reader his or her book, and so on. Then it goes on to say, number 5, that the library is a growing organism. I've looked at these rules over and over and over and over again. And I just feel that when these rules were being thought about, nobody remembered that Africa is a continent of oralcy. We pass on information orally. We are more used to oral tradition, not just tradition, oral communication. We are more used to preserving our thoughts, our history through oral communication, and we pass it on to others. So I don't think that these laws here, that they reflect that I see Africa in them. Apologies for that, dear colleagues, but I'm just speaking from my mind. Because of course one can say that the library is a growing organism, that it covers everything, that anything can happen. Yes, but if you look at all the others, it talks about books, the book. What if there's no book? What if our history are those things that are said, passed on from a generation to the other? Do we jettison it? And I asked a question, or I made a summation there, that it's possible that these principles, because they are principles really, that it is what caused the focus of African librarians to be on books without due consideration to African knowledge and local history that are mostly in oral format. Next slide, please. So I asked a question: why open African traditional knowledge and local history? I mean, why is it important? Why do we have to open it? I mean, everybody knows it's there. You can stay there now. The ones that we read now, are they not enough? Why do we have to open them? And I said in the next slide, because knowledge is power. That thing that is hidden, that thing that is not seen is powerless. Until it is seen and heard, until people know about it, that is when it becomes powerful. Next slide, Stanley. You see, our realities, our history, as our culture as Africans should be part of the global part of knowledge. That was what AFLIA started with when we introduced African librarians to Wikipedia, because we know that we cannot grow without opening up who we are and what we stand for. And then I also say that when we open up knowledge about ourselves, who we are, that it will create a better understanding and lead to more inclusion. Then in bold there, I said importantly, it will lead to quality and inclusive education as we adopt and practice the concept of open educational resources. And that is actually where we are headed to, because librarians are really invested in ensuring that Africa achieves SDG 4. And we have seen that one of the ways, or a major pathway for doing that, is really getting into the practice of OER. The next slide, please. This is a quote from Dr. Chika Ezanya Isiobu, who say that it is only when the significance of African indigenous, local or traditional knowledge is only when it is acknowledged that we'll have the key to advance the continent. Because you can't hide who you are and then try to be like other people and then achieve your destiny. You have to be yourself to a large extent. And in the next slide, I talked about the rationale for opening up our local knowledge. I had this experience. Somebody told me that there's this plant, this local plant, that if a pregnant woman that's always nauseous within the first trimester of pregnancy, that if you suck on that plant, the nausea will go, and not just that it will go, it will have no side effect on the baby. And I was like, oh, all these years I didn't know it. And the person said, but that they all know it. So this open in quotes knowledge is known in some parts of Nigeria, but in the other parts is not known. But what will happen if librarians can take this thing up, not just to take it up, this kind of information, this kind of knowledge, verify, because I said it there, verify, and then make sure that it is available to everyone through open licensing. Imagine the change it will create in the lives of people. And then I gave another reason. Next slide. From the periphery to the center. I read upon this theory. The dependency theory is really a theory for capitalism, economics, and underdevelopment. It talks about some nations being in the center of activities, innovations, development, and so on, and others being at the periphery. Meanwhile, those at the periphery are the ones that contribute their raw materials for the growth of those at the center. And I likened it to our knowledge. Things about Africa from Africa and written by Africans, most often people see them as they should be on the periphery, that those are that the knowledge at the center, in quote, should be those from the other side of the world. But when Africans, we talk about our culture, how we live, and the things we do and believe in, it is like it is labeled. Sometimes they'll say is hidden. Sometimes they'll say is paganistic and stuff like that. Then in the next slide, I gave two examples of really how information, knowledge from Africa is at the periphery, and that is one of the things that we want to change with this. If Stanley can blow up a little bit, this one is class 200 of Dewey classification, where it talks about religion, everything religion. So, and we use it to classify information resources in our different libraries. Now, when you look at that clearly, when you look at that, you see from that 200, 210, 220, 230, 240, 250, 260, it doesn't mention any religion from Africa. Does that mean that there was no religion in Africa even when Dewey was doing this? But it's because of this theory that I talked about, this peripheral knowledge, and that at the center. And that is why, if Stanley can blow it up again, when you get to 276, can you blow it up a little, Stanley? Yeah, 276. That is where you find anything first about Africa. It says the history of Christianity in Africa. That is to tell you, oh, you didn't have any religion. There was nothing you worshipped. There was nothing that you revered before Christianity came to Africa. And I always look at this and I say, well. But let's say that it's because that they did not see the information resources. They didn't see the knowledge about the things we do. That was why we were pushed right to that corner, and not just pushed there, but now told that, hey, you had nothing until we came. Please, can you go to the next slide, please, Stanley? Can you go to the next? All right, here. All right. No, so also here is the same thing under the 400 class from Dewey classification. If you go through it, it's on language, 400, language, the philosophy, the theory, 410, linguistics, then it goes to 420 English, 430 German languages, 440 French, Italian, Spanish, and so on and so forth. Until you now get to, please can you zoom in? Okay, I think you have. Until it gets to 496. That's where you see African languages. And when you see that now, you see that now in the, I think that Africa has like, I think a quarter or so of all the languages in the world are in Africa. Yet we were able to get only one window in this classification scheme that we have used over the ages and that we still use up till today. And that is one, again, of the reasons why AFLIA is advocating for opening up local and traditional knowledge. These things exist. These things are there. But because it's mostly in an oral form, we neglect them and feel, oh, they don't really matter. I want to assure you that they do. Next slide. I'm almost done. The next slide is the last. Yeah, this is the last slide. Yeah. So how do we do it? How do we collect, open, and celebrate this? I know my time is almost up. You know, first of all, we have to identify this knowledge, identify this local history. You may be surprised. Okay. If let's say that you have an airport, you know, it had just 5 buildings before, but now it has 10. Record it. It's part of your local history. You don't have to wait for any other person from another part of the world to come and say, oh, I passed through this airport today. Oh, it has changed. And then when you want to do a reference about that kind of information, you have to go and check that one from another part of the world because the person passed through that airport. Then think of the collection protocol. There's a difference between oral history and the one that is happening around you. There's a difference between oral tradition, and you have to know, how do you get it? Who do you approach? Who do you speak to? Who are the people who input? Who are the owners of the knowledge? Is it communal? Who do you get the real information from without bias? Because you always have to filter to ensure that you have the right thing. Because let's say that my village and another village went to war in 1870. If I ask anybody from my village, the person will say, we dealt with them. And I ask from another village, that person will also say, we dealt with you people. But the important thing is to get every perspective and then try to verify. That's why we have this information literacy skills at librarians. Then you transcribe where possible and then open. But I'll leave that open to Tony because that is what he's going to speak to us about. And then this ad, I put it there intentionally because AFLIA is hoping to get a grant soon that will help us create a subdomain where these things that we are going to open up, we are going to put there, and it will be a part of what people can use for open educational resources. I think I have to stop here. Thank you very much, Stanley. Please remember to ask your questions or put them in the chat box or in the Q&A feature. Thank you, Stanley.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nkem. Indeed, African knowledge characteristically is oral and is transferred from one generation to the other, and it's also by nature open. But what is important, I think, from what Dr. Nkem was mentioning, knowledge is power, and to the extent that knowledge is available to everybody makes it more powerful. So even though we know that our traditional knowledge is available within our very own little small cultures, where librarians will play a key role is when we take the step to document this knowledge and make it openly accessible so that everybody else can benefit from that. And what is also very important, even as Dr. Kim was explaining, is that in our quest to document and make this open, it's important to keep at the back of our minds the need to make sure that the information that we're documenting and making available is credible and verifiable. Yeah, so that we don't also whilst attempting to solve a problem, create another problem of misinformation. But I'm sure there's going to be more conversation in that regard. And thank you very much, Dr. Kim. I would like to usher in our next speaker, who is going to tell us more about how the US, and this is very interesting, has adapted this African traditional knowledge when it comes to culture, the food, and our stories. And a lot more examples are going to be shared. Let's welcome Liz. I'm going to quickly share her presentation and she can start. Liz, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can. Thank you very much, Stanley. As Stanley said, I'm going to talk about how African cultures reached the Americas and the relationship now between African culture, African librarians, and AFLIA. I was really interested in Nkem's opening slide where she told us about the WIPO definition of indigenous knowledge, because this is coming from the World Intellectual Property Organization. So they begin talking about indigenous and traditional knowledge, but then they move into intellectual output. And that's not entirely the same thing. And I suspect that it's because WIPO is serving a different constituency than those of us who talk about traditional knowledge. So what I did, and I won't read you the quote, but I went to the overview on the OER recommendation that AFLIA produced a few months ago. And I took a quote from Dr. Nkem on the relationship between openness and oralcy and how open knowledge in Africa is founded on an oral precept, and it includes stories that can be retold and added upon without restrictions or anyone claiming intellectual property rights. So in the very beginning, without even knowing it, the people telling these stories were using the concepts of open licensing and OER. And wherever I mention an expert, I've given you a link to the document where I found the information. Next slide, Stanley. Okay. I found this really interesting, this blog, because the man who wrote the blog put the storytelling that takes place in the African American community in the United States and elsewhere in the Americas in the format that storytelling took place in Africa. So questions were asked and answered, history was conveyed, lifelong lessons were taught, and that these repositories of the past have a responsibility to preserve the principles and values of the people. And in one of Dr. Nkem's slides, she talked about the influence of all the different aspects of culture, agriculture, music, history, lifelong learning, basically. So the stories might change to fit the circumstances, but the method of telling the stories is largely the same. Next slide, please. This is where I started to get really interesting, because I sent this presentation to the members of the AFLIA Administrative Committee earlier this morning. And they started to write me back about being told Anansi stories when they were children. Stanley wrote me, Doreen wrote me, Nikem wrote me that Anansi traveled to Nigeria too. And they compared what they were told and what the stories were and who the characters were. So I'm really hoping that as part of our discussion, others of you will bring forward the stories you were told when you were a child and who told you those stories. Next slide, please. And for those of you who like to eat as much as I do and who also like to cook, I was really interested in all of the recipes that come from Africa and are being used in the Americas. There is a Senegalese dish that became rice pudding in Haiti. African rice reached the Carolinas when the first slaves did. And it's on the backs of that slave labor that the Carolinas built their economy. I love black-eyed peas, and they came originally from Africa, and it's a tradition in New Orleans to eat black-eyed peas for New Year's Eve. Jambalaya, feijoada, and all of the other wonderful dishes come from Senegal, Nigeria, Guinea, Benin, and they've all been made throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. Next slide, please. Now, I found all of those examples in a 10-minute Google search, and there were a lot more that I could have used, but I wanted to keep the presentation short. But when I did a Google search specifically on African folktales, although I found a lot of results on Anansi and all of the other heroes in stories coming from Africa, but most of those folktales were from Africa, but they were retold by Westerners. There was very little that came directly from Africa by Africans. And this is where I think that AFLIA and African librarians can play a really important role. And I hope you agree with me, because what needs to happen is to find a place, a platform where librarians can begin to collect their culture and to license it openly and put it on the web and make it widely accessible and identifiable by the worldwide community. And I say that librarians and AFLIA should do this because I can't see anyone else who can play such an important role in collecting, catalog, and curating information such as this. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Liz. And it's wonderful. I think from this very short presentation, it tells of how far knowledge can travel, even though we think it's traditional knowledge from Africa, how it's adapted, it's being used and replicated across different cultures, and goes to emphasize the need for some of these knowledge, traditional knowledge, to be documented. And what is even more interesting, I remember, and I'm sure everybody is a witness to this jollof wars that we have between Nigeria and Ghana, you know, and it got to a point where I read an article that apparently all the noise that we're making, as a matter of fact, the jollof dish did not even originate from Ghana and Nigeria. You know, I'm not going to mention the other country because I don't want to give them mileage, because we know that Ghanaian jollof is still the best. But what is important for us is that knowledge is useful. It could be adapted in many forms, make it relevant. Like Dr. Nkem said, it's powerful. And so it's important that we take these conversations up to the next step. I like the fact that Liz is calling AFLIA and African librarians out, because the bottom line is that nobody's going to do it better than we can do it, because it's our knowledge, it's our history, it's our culture, it's our dance, it's our food, and we know the stories behind all of these things. So thank you very much. At this point, I think it's best to usher in our very last speaker, then we can do the open discussions. But I'd like to say that when it's time for the open discussions, if you want to contribute, just put up your hand. We will allow you to speak. All right, but for now, let's finish up with the main discussants. I would invite Dr. Nyofo from Nigeria to continue the discussion. She's going to be talking about how we can publicize the traditional knowledge and the customs. So let's listen to the ideas that Dr. Florence Nyofo has for us. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. And thank you, Stanley. It's my pleasure to be here. In fact, I am Dr. Nwofo. Okay, thank you. Nkem has actually done a lot of the work. She has actually brought out to us what this traditional knowledge and customs are. She actually summed them from what I got into: art knowledge, indigenous art knowledge, indigenous cultural knowledge, indigenous environmental conservation knowledge, indigenous agricultural knowledge, and indigenous ritual knowledge. I think this is a broad description of what actually constitutes our traditional knowledge and customs. Okay, I think my take now is to actually say what and how we as librarians can actually get this knowledge into the public domain and make it more known. Like we all know, there's been this kind of global recognition for indigenous and traditional knowledge recently. Okay, it has actually gained a lot of acceptance in the global community. And this has made it more expedient that librarians should essentially devise ways of increasing its use. And we cannot use them if they don't actually do something about creating avenues for people to access them. A lot of other institutions away from libraries, like archives, are also custodians of this knowledge, this cultural heritage knowledge that we talk about. We see them in diverse forms as drawings, as paintings, as carvings, as other documentary artifacts, as even manuscripts and records, audio records, visual items that are really treasuries of indigenous experiences and our history. Libraries keep them. Some libraries have been able to harness and keep them, but there's also need for libraries to manage them appropriately. So what will libraries do? Libraries still have to do a lot of work in the respect of, bringing this knowledge to the awareness of people and to their use. Libraries can adopt a lot of approaches. Some of these approaches include promoting community publishing. And what is community publishing? A lot of this artifacts, a lot of this knowledge, a lot of these stories that are part of the cultural heritage are actually kept with the people who own them. The elders, when they die, we say we've lost the library. Yes, because most of the knowledge are kept in their memories. Some of them are domiciled in the practices that we have within our local communities. But it is important that we enable these communities to publish this materials, publish this knowledge. Libraries and the librarians could actually get in touch with the owners of the knowledge, the elders who are the custodians, so that they can share these experiences. When they share these experiences, people could be encouraged to document it. The librarians could even bring in people to document this information. For instance, we could go to the Igwes, that's the heads of our local communities. We could also go to the power brokers, get them to do documentaries, like of their festivals, do documentaries of their, bring in the mass media to do documentaries of their festivals, bring in authors to write. For instance, the public library over here,
We lost her.
All right. Hello, Dr. Amaka. I think your internet is giving up. Hello. All right. Yeah. Okay. So in the meantime, while we wait for Dr. Amaka to reconnect.
sorry, I'm sorry,
Okay.
there was this disconnect. Okay,
Right.
we could
You can go ahead, please.
Yes, we could go to this local power brokers, like the heads of our communities, discuss with them. They bring in the intellectuals amongst them, and we could do documentaries. For instance, the public library here of the Anambra State Library Board was able to get to local communities. It was together with the director, we're able to get to some local communities who did documentaries of their history of their communities, some of their festivals, okay? We could harness all that to actually create the necessary documents. Because when these things occur just in the head of people and in their practices, and they are not documented, the possibility of their use and creating access may be difficult. So when we do this kind of community engagement through advocacy, we can be able to document this information resources. And when we document them into information resources, when actually we have this information resources as books and other audio records, we can be able to now put them in our collections and create the required access. We could also do what we call information repackaging, okay? This traditional knowledge could be repackaged. When we create posters, things like posters, when we create pictures, we create storybooks out of them. Some of the storybooks now written in the vernacular language. We could also create visuals and videos of all these resources. When we are able to gather them into tangible forms, then we can actually put them into the collections of libraries and increase access. We could also do other community engagements that involve bringing the elders of the community, and then encouraging them, okay? Encouraging them to bring out this resource, this information and knowledge that they have, that we know they are so reluctant to divulge. Sometimes they are very reluctant to divulge them. But if we tell them and we let them know that they can actually have the intellectual property, they can own the intellectual property rights of these documents when they are created, and that we can enable them protect their knowledge by the giving of the intellectual property rights. When we are able to convince them, I think they will be able to divulge a lot of the information that is kept in their heads. For instance, we have a lot of medicinal information, and like the local bone setters, the local, the people who use local herbs to treat various ailments in the community. If we are able to get this information from them and document them, I think libraries will go a long way to increase the access to this information that they own and they have. When libraries are able to do this, they will be able to create the required publicity, okay? And there are other things libraries could also do. For instance, libraries could use ICTs. This is where ICT comes in. If we are able to harness the strengths of the ICT resources that libraries can use, for instance, the digital technologies offered by ICT, video recordings, digital video recordings, the use of multimedia capacities, we can create databases of a lot of the information that we are able to gather from this local owners of the knowledge. When we record this knowledge, when we manage them well, we can use the ICTs to actually disseminate them and create more avenues for people to access them. Then we could also go into the communities to collect the materials, collect the resources. And when we are able to collect them and we are sure the collections are guaranteed, for instance, we can promote access by having face-to-face encounter, okay? Like we could have storytelling hours where elders are invited to come and tell the stories to the children. And as the stories are told, we document them. We could also have other face-to-face forums and create network formations where we can discuss issues relating to communities. We could organize talk shows involving traditional rulers, the elderly people, and other professionals who hold various vocations. We can pull them together, do a kind of recording on the various local vocations and on the various subject areas that they have, like on agriculture, on the ecosystem, on medical care, conflict resolutions. When we are able to do this kind of face-to-face engagement and we document them, we can also put them up in our libraries, and we can do partnerships with our indigenous communities to gather all this relevant knowledge. Efforts could also be made to persuade traditional institutions and resource persons to share their indigenous knowledge with libraries for proper preservation and for proper access. We can also liaise and create partnerships with library schools around our local communities. For instance, when we are able to use the students in our various library schools, we can create indigenous knowledge collections that could be repackaged. We know that every year we train quite a good number of our students. They are made to go into the rural communities in this course that we teach called Oral Tradition, Libraries, Literature, and Culture. The students are made to go into the local communities to collect local knowledge, especially those that are threatened with extinction. They come back with these resources that have been transcribed, that have additional CDs that are put into CDs and other digital formats that could be enabled when we get them into our digital and upload them into the internet. We find out that we may be creating greater access to these local resources, local information, local knowledge that are lying waste in the various communities because people were not able to come and collect them. Okay, we could also develop policies. It's important that libraries develop policies and strategies for managing indigenous knowledge. The truth is that because we lack these policies that would drive the activities and the approaches that we adopt, because we actually lack integrated and articulated policies, we find out that libraries are unable to carry on with the collection and the use and access of indigenous knowledge. It is important that if libraries have these policies, the policies will take care of training the manpower for doing the work. We'll also have policies on how to navigate and how to engage the local practitioners and the stakeholders who actually have the local and indigenous knowledge. Then when we have this policy, it will also take care of how to give and assign intellectual property rights to the owners. The labor that is required, the time required for doing the collection, and the funding. When libraries have such articulated policies, I think it will go a long way to actually help libraries to carry on with the onerous task of collecting, preserving, creating access and use of our local and indigenous knowledge. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Amaka. I think I'm going to stick with the middle name because it's easier for me to pronounce. Yeah, but you would agree with me that very interesting suggestions on how to open up and publish, including the community publishing idea. I'm sure we would like to talk more about it, using the documentaries, involving community elders and encouraging them to share their knowledge. And then, of course, information repackaging and all. I think one important thing that you also mentioned has to do with the licensing regimes that would have to accompany such African knowledge initiatives. We're going to be talking more about that next week. It's part of the things that our panelists will be handling for tomorrow. But we are unfortunately running out of time. I don't want to waste too much time. It's time for the open discussions. I've seen some wonderful chats already. Grant is saying that a key question is incentives. Why would indigenous knowledge holders want to contribute their knowledge? In my experience of developing traditional knowledge projects, people want to get paid even if it is a small amount. And ICT is a good option, and there is enough there is enough African knowledge content on the internet, so disseminating traditional knowledge. Disseminating traditional knowledge on the web is important. It also allows speakers of those languages who are in different locations and overseas to access the mother tongue. Thank you for your contribution, Grant. I think the issue about seeking payment before they divulge information, Liz is making a suggestion, and I think that's also something worth looking into, because if it's an initiative from someone from within the community, the disposition of the knowledge bearers would definitely be different from an outsider seeking to get the information. But let me allow Antonetta. Your hand has been up for quite some time. You want to weigh into this conversation. Let's hear you, please. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. Hello.
Yes, go ahead. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. I want to thank you for this presentation, and the previous speaker, the way she was outlining how we can contribute. I like the idea of partnering with already existing traditional institutions. They could be writers, they could be people who are doing their dances or whatever arts they are doing. And also, if we can also work with the historians once more, so that even our libraries can represent the communities, and then we migrate the information to share on the world platform. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Nenta. Yes, thank you for your contribution. If anyone wants to weigh in, you can put up your hand. We will enable you to speak. Otherwise, you can also send in your remarks by chat. Okay, so Dudu says, is there a library that has a policy on traditional knowledge, or if you like, a library that has traditional knowledge policy? I think Dr. Maka just dropped off. Is she still around?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about policies around African traditional knowledge, and how libraries also can be instrumental in this regard. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but okay, maybe let me take Liz, and then I can come back to you, Doc.
Okay.
Hello, Liz. Yes, 2 minutes, please.
Okay. In terms of a traditional knowledge policy, I think it's something worth looking into. I do know that at the University of British Columbia in Canada, it's not the library, but it's a team of scholars, and I think the librarians are working with Indigenous communities to develop open licensing policies in languages that those communities understand and can relate to. And I can send more information on that to you all. And I can also do some hunting for other libraries that might have policies. It's an excellent question.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Amaka, please, you can go ahead.
Okay. Liz has just told us about what happens in developed economies. But I think over here within our local situations, I don't know of any existing one. But I know, for instance, that the National Library actually uploads local knowledge. Yes, it's part of the content that the National Library actually uploads, but I don't know if there is a policy, a standing policy. But libraries could begin to, because we are talking about being proactive, libraries that don't have such policies could actually start tinkering about how to develop such a policy. And that was why I actually mentioned some of the things that they could consider in the development of their policies. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Yeah, there is it for you, Dudu, and thank you for the question. Any comments, any reactions, or any additional questions? We are 10 minutes past. We just have about 5 minutes to wrap up. I would like to remind you that tomorrow the conversation continues. It's going to take a different angle or aspect, more related to translations. I think, yes, Dr. Maka mentioned documenting this even also in vernacular. We're going to be hearing from Dorcas more about this from Dorcas tomorrow. And then we're going to be talking more about the licenses and how we can, as we seek to document these things, how we can approach it in the best way so that it's open for everybody to have access to, and a bit more on documentations as well. Any other remarks from the audience? Questions from the audience? Well, I have this thing. I have this thought in my mind. I'm just asking what the way forward, for instance, could be. I'm thinking that a more deliberate move or initiative to promote African traditional knowledge is required. And if we're looking at, okay, wait, let me just read out what Judith, you are contributing to this. If you don't mind, I can allow you to speak, but I can read what you have for now. As a national museum, we work with the communities in that we had workshops for the staff on traditional knowledge. There's a program for schools where we either go to the schools or they visit a museum for formal educational classes on different titles or traditional practices and norms. Okay, all right, thank you very much. So Judith is emphasizing the fact that the National Museum has this kind of information and that students do come and have access to. Thank you for the informative presentations. Okay, so I think there's a right. Okay, so I mean, probably that will be the last thing for us to discuss, the way forward. Would it require a deliberate move to sort of do this kind of documentation and opening up the traditional knowledge? Is this something we should leave for librarians from the individual communities to be doing, or it's something that would require a certain form of proper coordination and supervision, either from a regional body or a national body, you know, something like this. What's our take on this? Because I'm thinking that I remember when I was in school at the university level, people would be doing this as part of their academic projects, but as to whether this really is something that is making as much impact as would require in opening up traditional knowledge is also another question for discussion. But I don't know if somebody wants to weigh in on how deliberate we should be, especially from the national, probably regional level, in promoting opening of African knowledge. Anybody to say something?
Yeah. Stanley, I think it's important that we become very intentional about this traditional knowledge. You know, it involves not people doing it on their own individual basis, but bringing in our professional associations and our regulatory bodies of the various countries to actually form a synergy and a kind of body to actually articulate how to be deliberate and intentional about, because there is really need for us to bring this traditional knowledge to the fore of people. Suffice it to say that if we don't, a lot of our traditional knowledge is threatened with extinction. The urbanization we have around town is actually threatening the preservation of this knowledge.
Thank you very much. Due to time, I would like for us to wrap up here. And okay, Grant, let me allow you to speak just for about a minute, and then we can wrap up and continue tomorrow. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you. And thanks to all the presenters. I'd just like to echo some of the sentiments to say, look, this is very important knowledge, and there are definitely audiences for it. And I base this on work that we have done developing traditional knowledge platforms online, initially with the eThekwini Municipal Library in Durban in South Africa. We worked with them to build a local knowledge platform in the local language isiZulu, and in other work that we've now done. So just to say, when I say there are audiences, you know, we get hundreds of thousands of people who visit our platforms monthly. So I don't have all the answers, but I think there's definite scope to work on a kind of continental level, and it will require a fair amount of coordination. But I'll share some links in the chat now. But yeah, just to say, I think that it's important to share it and to use the internet to share it, and that there's great interest.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was just about saying that it'll be wonderful if you can share, put this platform, a link to the platform, so that everybody else can go and check out the wonderful things you're doing with regards to opening up traditional knowledge from Africa. Yeah, and then when there is a need for people to reach out to you, I'm sure they can definitely connect with you. We continue the conversation tomorrow. Let's try to be here on time. There's a lot more to talk about, a lot more to chew on. And then if you have any questions or thoughts, even after here, I'm sure there's another opportunity to bring it up for a discussion tomorrow. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, Tony. Yes, you're in the background, but yeah, supporting. Thank you, Liz. Wonderful presentation and insights. Thank you, Dr. Nkem, as always. And then Dr. Amaka, we're grateful for the time, and we hope to catch everybody the same time tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.